it was useful to recognize that I struggled with big feelings, but both positive and negative.
This is Interfering Neurotic with me, Dr. Ash King, and mindfulness coach Darren Larson, where we navigate a life lived with the curses and blessings of big feelings. Welcome, you're listening to Interfering Neurotic with me, Dr. Ash King, and mindfulness coach Darren Larson. Welcome, Darren. We've got a special guest with us today.
Hey, Ash. Yeah, I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this for weeks and months. We've got Mark Freeman. We've talked about your work in our previous episodes, and I think what connects Ash and I is I think we're both interested not in waiting for crisis to address our mental health and not waiting for maybe magical skills to appear when it comes to our big feelings, but being able to be proactive about that. So anyway, so thrilled to have you here. Before we jump into like what I appreciate most about your work and asking you to kind of speak to some of those themes, I just have to ask because I'm sort of low key stalking you on Instagram and you're in Peru right now. And I saw llamas, I've seen tents and yurts and snow. Could you just fill us in a little bit about where you are, what you're up to?
Yes, I'm in Cusco right now, and I'm a huge fan of Cusco, Peru. Like, I've got to give a shout out to Cusco. It's my second time here. I think sometimes people maybe know about Cusco as this place they're going to fly into if they're going to Machu Picchu.
Mm.
There is so much more. It is such a beautiful town and a fascinating area. So yeah, for everybody, if you ever get a chance to come to Cusco, you get to go climbing in the mountains with alpacas, chinchillas, maybe some llamas. The llamas aren't as friendly as the alpacas, but it's yeah, it's an amazing place. So yeah, if you ever get a chance, I recommend Cusco.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, and looking at the pictures, it makes me wonder what came before this adventure for you, but I have really strong like Ben Stiller, Walter Mitty, Ben Stiller's take on Walter Mitty, the vibes of that movie. I keep thinking, is Mark experiencing Walter Mitty life?
Because I haven't seen Walter Mitty, but am I correct? Does Walter Mitty, does he actually go on the adventures or does he only think about them?
So in the book, in the
Yeah.
Thurber, right? Isn't it Thurber? The Thurber book, he's just thinking. But Ben
Okay.
Stiller takes it into a direction, and you actually might be able to. There's some overlap, and there's got to be some overlap. So he actually goes on adventures, and I think it's an underappreciated movie. I'm very moved by it. I've seen it a
Yeah.
couple times. It's beautiful. So,
Maybe
all
I'll check it
right.
out because I think that is, yeah, kind of relevant maybe to some things we get into. Because yeah, I don't have a home. I live on the road and travel around. And that was in part because when I heard the idea of kind of being nomadic, to me that just meant, yeah, you sell everything you own and you head off and become kind of like a wandering monk. And so I just went for it. But I actually rarely meet anybody else who has kind of no home base, is
Uh,
just like
yeah.
just out there wandering around. But I love it. Yeah.
How
So I
long have you
spend
been at
usually a
that?
couple months. I'm not even sure. This is maybe the third full year and going into the
Wow.
fourth. Yeah.
I
And so I
smell a
just
memoir
have,
in there. Yeah.
it's such an unusual practice, I find that like I
Yeah.
just have three small bags. Like I have a small carry-on is my largest bag, and then a backpack and kind of a little satchel bag.
Okay.
And I love it. It would be very difficult to go back to having
Wow.
a place again. Yeah.
So, can I just briefly say, and maybe Ash, I don't know. So, I've been practicing mindfulness for over 22 years, teaching for maybe about 15 years, somehow, a very Midwestern approach, if that helps, like as opposed to what people think of a California vibe. So, I'm very practical, grounded, down to earth. I'm more interested in applying it in daily life than I am in like, trying to escape life. But so I have to admit, when I read your book,
We have to tell everyone what the book is.
thank you. Thank you.
I'm showing it. It's called You Are Not a Rock. And Mark, I could let you introduce it if you want. You're a dedicated mental health advocate now after struggling with mental illness for years. But this book is the book you wrote that you wish you would have written before you got into
Yes.
all those struggles. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. After exploring all of the struggles and then all of the changes involved with recovery, it was really, yeah, putting together a set of exercises that would hopefully help other people on a similar adventure. Totally.
So I'll just say, and then ask you to speak to the book a little bit. But when I was reading it, I was like, wait, what? I've never, number one, I kept thinking, why is this not more popular? Why are these themes not discussed more? Why am I just kind of accidentally bumping up against this? But at the same time, I was shocked by how many applications, how many things, catching myself, checking and controlling and coping. I don't necessarily identify. I might be like the identity of OCD has never been a thing. But as I'm reading your book, I'm like, if I just stay away from the identity of what you're talking about, the symptoms and behaviors I could so relate to. So I don't know. I'll just say briefly, I was soon after discovering your book, I went on a vacation and I just noticed I was packing differently and I was not double checking and triple checking things. And the it was a weekend hiking in West Texas, and I was consciously applying some of the things I was learning from you, and it transformed the vacation. It just felt lighter. I felt less time, less energy going to sort of undercutting myself and more time kind of trusting myself. So how would you describe your approach? What makes your approach to OCD and OCD symptoms different than what you saw out there when you discovered you needed some help with skills and tools?
I think you touched on something really important there. And even I'd emphasize with the book that it's about, yeah, proactively building great mental health and fitness for everybody. That these skills are really tools and practices that benefit everybody. Like I'll have to say everybody that has a brain. Because, yeah, maybe if we start practicing a lot of unhealthy practices, that'll kind of build up and build up. And at some point, it'll be distressing. And depending on how we react to that distress, we'll get some kind of label. Even
Mm,
on my journey, I picked up a bunch of different labels. But the kind of mountain of practices that get us there are things that generally seem very normal. Like we'll have a lot of practices maybe around checking uncertainty. So across the board, we all benefit from starting to get proactive with building those mental health and fitness skills. And so in
hmm
some ways too, that's the thing that I'd say is kind of different about how I would even approach something like OCD. It helped me to see that even though there were a bunch of compulsions that got me a label with OCD, pretty much the bulk of practices that led me there were things that we generally see as normal.
Ah,
And so it really helped then too in what I explore now often with people is that we can't just stop at the symptoms that we might give a label to that might have picked up an acronym. They're kind of like the mountain peak. So we might give a
hmm
label to the peak of the mountain, but there's this huge pile of boulders
mm,
of normal behaviors underneath there. And that if we want to prevent going back to that distressful mountain peak, we've got to blow up the entire mountain,
yeah.
which is both fun, but then also, I think, yeah, challenging, and then something that applies to everybody.
And Mark, how did you feel when you realized like how daunting it would be to start making steps towards your recovery, like to start to blow up that mountain, right? I imagine that it
Yeah.
didn't all come crashing down with one blow.
No,
Kind of had to take one bit at a time. So, did you ever find yourself really very much identified as I am a person with mental illness, I am a person with OCD, with those labels?
no, I was, and this is good and bad. I was really lucky that I had like zero insight. So until I was actually in treatment and they had to give me a diagnosis, I'd never interacted with any kind of diagnoses at all. Even when I was doing stuff that, like at that point, I wasn't using knives. I couldn't touch all sorts of foods. I would stand in front of my stove. I would wake up and start doing compulsions, and then the sun would be setting, and I'd be like, wow, I've missed a complete day. I thought that was all normal and necessary.
Mm, Mm-hmm.
So I never went on a mental health forum until after I'd done therapy. Even kind of when I was in therapy, I was like in such a bad state that, if they were saying, "Oh, there's this thing you have," I didn't really interact with it. And so I think that was lucky. That was lucky in two ways. One, uh, afterwards, I didn't feel too attached to a label. I I
Mm.
really looked at, okay, what are the skills that are going to help me just continue with living my life? But also because I had seen everything I was doing as normal and rational, that was also useful with recognizing there was this huge mountain I had to blow up because I didn't like sometimes I'll see people refer to like my anxious thoughts or my irrational thoughts, my OCD worries, oh, that's the
Mm.
depression talking. For me, it was all the same thing. So when we were talking about changes in therapy, it was evident to me that, oh, if I'm cutting out these compulsions, well, they're the exact same pattern as everything else I do in my life. So I've
Mm.
probably got to look at changes everywhere else too.
Would this be right? Like something relatable, I think, for people. Like have a candle burning and we rush out of the house to go see a movie. I blow the candle out, but I'm kind of hurrying. Halfway to the movie
Yeah.
theater, I'm thinking, oh my God, wait. Is my house going to be burnt? Is my house burning down right now? How can I be watching a movie when there's a possibility
Mhm.
of I could see fire trucks and the house going up in smoke and
Yeah.
whatever, and I could try to tell myself that I blew out that candle, but something in my body is saying absolutely you need to go back and check. Um,
Yes.
and I guess I would take that as yeah defensible by any measure. If we told someone I think I might have
Mhm.
left a candle burning, they would say okay.
Yes.
But then one by one by one, it starts to, like you said, there's an underlying pattern of not paying attention, not trusting myself, to even have any confidence of what did I just do 5 minutes ago. Is that what you're kind of referring to, that mountain of building up the patterns?
Exactly. Anybody, I had all sorts of compulsions around like checking to make sure something hadn't caught fire. And
Hmm.
it's yeah, the exercises to cut it out though are yeah, really difficult. So what I would do around things like that, yeah, if I had been using a candle or even an exercise I practice, because in the past I wouldn't cook something even if I knew I was going to leave later in the day because I'd think, oh no, I'm not going to be able to remember, or I'm going to need to come back. So I started cooking things right before leaving, precisely so the brain would then go, oh no, like, do you remember turning off the stove? What if you left something on the stove? And the
Right.
exercise I would practice around that at first was just about picturing, I would picture oil canisters, grenades on the stove, whatever, just flames. I would tell the brain, of course I didn't turn off the candle. I actually flipped over the candle before I left. So the house is going to be burnt down. It's already burnt down. So there's no point in us going back now. And then later, I recognized that often those fears of, causing something to burn down were actually loaded up with social anxieties. Like I was afraid
Mm,
of causing a fire that would harm
yeah.
other people, and then they would be angry at me. And when we get down to a fear like that, oh, I want to I want to have certainty about this so I can be certain people won't be angry at me. Then I could also look at, well, what are all the other things I do throughout my life to prevent people being angry at me? And then suddenly there's this huge list of seemingly normal things I do,
Right.
constantly checking emails I've written, checking text messages, checking eye contact with people, so many different things. And so then also recognizing it was very natural my brain worried about stuff like that because I was telling it all day, hey, we should really control, what people think
Everything.
about.
Right. Do you remember, was there like a first moment of, okay, wait, maybe this isn't all defensible and logical. Maybe this has gotten out of hand. Was there some way that you were able to be more objective about that?
Because I believed everything completely, that
Yeah.
it really helped me to approach it. I'll often describe it as being unreasonable. I was always capable of coming up with a reason, a very rational sounding reason to do compulsions. And so personally, I had to embrace that I was doing these practices that were just out there, kind of agreeing with my brain, like being, yeah,
Mm,
brain, you're absolutely right. That's a totally valid, rational thing to think. and I'm gonna go and do just this wild practice that's gonna piss you off. So often I'll describe it as making the brain squirm.
Mm,
Like the brain would be very upset all the time, and I think that gets at things like big feelings that you've explored on many episodes. My brain would have big feelings about not going back to fix something, to check something.
I'm
yeah.
I'm interested in your take of our take of neuroticism, and we kind of want to pull it out of, the mental health Bibles as what it's been, and sort of explore it for what it might indicate about our capacity to feel, and maybe some people's
Right.
just natural predisposition to feel in heightened ways. Sometimes when I speak to people who would never have ever thought to call themselves neurotic, or maybe have never had lived experience with mental health challenges. I grew up battling anxiety as a teenager and most of my adult life, depression. I've done all the different sort of therapeutic modalities. So I've explored everything that there is to offer. I think what me and Darren came together over was this idea that there seem to be just some people that their feelings, for better or for worse, seem to take up so much more of them and
Mhm.
occupy so much more of their body and mind. How does that sit with you? Would you consider yourself a big feelings person, or do you think that that label's not helpful?
I think big feelings are an interesting area to explore. And in because even yeah, I find the kind of the classic definition of neuroticism doesn't even I think it's almost too limited. Because I found for me, it was useful to recognize that I struggled with big feelings, but both positive and negative. That
Uh-huh.
any feeling that just started to kind of hit a certain level, I just had an automatic reaction to shut things down, even if it was a
Mm,
good feeling, because I had all of these kind of formula and rules. Like, oh, if we have this feeling, then we must do this action. Or if we have this feeling, it means we're going to lose control. Or, yeah, if we have this really good feeling, like we really care about somebody, well, then we could lose them. So we better shut down that care. And so across the board, I found many of my behaviors were about trying to make feelings smaller. Sometimes
mhm.
when we're exploring even things like acceptance or exploring how to have feelings while doing things we value, sometimes people will, kind of say like, oh, well, I don't want to be a robot. But I find it's not at all about being robotic. But now that I would say because I don't have to react in those old ways
Mm,
to big feelings, I can actually have them. Like it was a really great thing or experience in recovery of actually being able to be sad or being able to be angry. Because in the past, I would have seen those as kind of threatening and I can't have them and I'll lose control. Or being able to like really care about somebody, being able to be in love and risk losing that. Because in the past, I would have avoided that. So yeah, now I see it as in many ways these practices as being able to have feelings and have really
mhm.
big feelings. Yeah, whereas before that was such a big kind of no-no, a thing to avoid.
I think it's really great that you've reflected on it that way, because it's like many of us are born and we come into the world with these big feelings, almost like we're born on roller skates, but no one teaches us how to skate.
Yes, yes,
So no wonder heaps of people are, like eating the pavement and scraping their butts and falling down. It's just, as some other people who are just like, oh, just get over it, or don't do that, or I wouldn't feel that way. Whether they're being honest or not, or whether they just can't imagine what it would be like to live your life in your body, they seem to think that it's not that much of a challenge to be able to live with the feelings that you've got coming up inside you. Whereas, yeah, Darren and I, most of our conversations are around, no, 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 these feelings are here. We don't need to
yes,
get rid of them. We don't need to be a rock or have dead person's goals, as I've also heard it mentioned. It's just like, oh, I
yes,
want to not feel. Oh, okay. Do you want to
mhm,
be a dead person then? Because they don't feel.
Right, right,
yes.
right.
But we just need to learn how to harness these feelings, how to allow them to exist within us. And man, it's so much easier said than done.
I think the roller skates is like a great metaphor because I feel that's how it often, like if I was on roller skates and then just kind of started to tilt in one direction or just started to pick up some speed and immediately went go, oh no, I'm gonna crash. That yeah, anytime the feelings started to get into that territory, I was just like, well, we've got to stop. Let's go sit down over there. I don't want to be on roller skates. Let's go play arcade games. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
learning how to allow those feelings that actually, yeah, maybe we will fall, but maybe we'll also, do some tricks or go really fast and enjoy it. And we can have that experience. But yeah, it's so understandable that we feel something a little off balance and immediately try to shut down.
I think I got it from you, this idea of getting bad at a sport I'm good at. So I, for
Yes.
years, have described as my mindfulness practice. I'm not practicing mindfulness because I'm good at relaxing or good at not talking or sitting still. It's because I'm really a talented warrior. I come from a long line of really skilled, creative, worst case scenario type thinkers and feelers with very few skills at their disposal. And I just love, and I use this very often now when I'm promoting mindfulness, is if you're doing it right, it feels like you're getting bad at something you've been good at for a very long time, which is worrying and obsessing and controlling and checking and these things, which to the world, all those things you say, you can get support from the culture supports you not feeling. So worrying is kind of maybe a global pastime in our culture now. When we start to talk about compulsion specifically, people think, well, that person is washing their hands incessantly, but I'm not doing that. I'm praying every time I have a sexual thought or something, and so
Yep.
I'm not like them at all. And one of the things I have the hardest time is trying to get people to connect the dots that below the specific stories, there's those patterns that you talk about, right? And that I don't know, how do we get people to even consider, not that they need to identify as big feelings or OCD or whatever, but that there could possibly be some benefit in questioning some of the habitual relationship to uncertainty or unpleasant emotion. How do we get people to even consider they could be part of this club of humanity that we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because it's always a question that I would say is challenging because I think in part there's this kind of macro level issue where we've approached mental health as being illness based. And so it is
Hmm.
always very easy for somebody to say, I don't have a problem, therefore I don't need to work on something. Whereas I think physical fitness did a better job of focusing it around skills. Like we don't think of you as needing, we don't say you need an endurance disorder to build cardiovascular fitness, even
Hmm.
though arguably anybody who doesn't do any kind of cardio, if we then ask them to go for a run, they would quickly discover they have an endurance disorder. But we just see it as a natural capacity. If we don't practice it, of course we don't have it. We haven't taken the same approach with mental health, but I think it is useful to look at. It's so how I'll often describe it to people is just around how do you want to spend your time and energy in life? If we feel like we have to do something over and over and over again, forget whether we call it a compulsion or whether it has anything to do with mental illness. Do you want to learn how to not have to do that? Do you want to learn how to, yeah, have something unexpected happen and not have to stay up all night thinking about it? Do you want to develop some skills around giving your attention to things that matter to you in life? Do you want to learn, yeah, how to have some difficult feelings
Mm.
and celebrate them or make them part of life? So I often go in that direction. But have you found anything? What do you find helps people connect with these ideas that, yeah, we can have these feelings in our lives?
I think one on one, people come to me saying they want to get better at mindfulness, but they really just want to repeat their stories and fears. It's harder to get them to act. It's like going to the gym. I want to be more fit, but I'm like, well, here's some exercises you can do, but they want to just talk about getting fit. I think mindfulness is, to me, notorious for promoting the identity of mindfulness. You can subscribe to Calm on Demand, but you don't have to necessarily put in the time.
Mhm.
You can get by. But what I find is when I have a group of people, and if one person fumbles around trying to describe practicing feeling a pleasant or unpleasant feeling with a little more intention, right? Just to get better at feeling, then it cracks open the door. I don't think I can explain in a way that convinces anyone to like question some of their assumptions. But when humans get together and say, I notice this, I notice sadness felt like this in my body, or I notice my mind does this when I'm really anxious, and normalizing it together, and people start to connect the dots. And I think that has been the closest thing I've seen to people having the potential to recognize maybe I could practice a different way of responding to this thing that I've just assumed I've always had to do the same thing I've did the last time, right? When something resonates as true, I'm curious, Ash, what you think of this too. When something feels true, I don't think anyone can talk you out of it. Whether it's,
Mm.
I just broke up, or I woke up scared, or I'm giving a presentation and I'm afraid I'm going to embarrass myself. I can't talk you out of your feelings because the whole story feels true to you. So I don't know. How do you think about this?
I have been thinking about this because it's as if once you've decided or had that felt sense that something is true and real, that it really can explode and direct your life in all these different ways. This is what I also want to ask you, Mark. I really liked when you directed people in your book to draw up a kind of map of the things that occupy their time. So,
Yeah.
put working in a bubble, and if you see friends, put that there. And if you spend a lot of time, doing things that maybe you're not that proud of, put that there. Like, call yourself out and look at it for what it is, and then create another map on the other side and draw the way that you would like your life to be. And the therapists who are listening know that a lot of this has components of ACT therapy, of understanding sort of our values and living a values driven life. But I'm curious about how the urges and compulsions and feelings that come up regarding coping, checking, and controlling when they're embedded in your values, how
Mm.
that makes things different for you. And I would find it the most difficult when it comes to other people. Like you mentioned, when you pull
Yeah.
back, you realize actually a lot of this stuff has to do with maybe how I'll be judged by others or how I'll be received by others. And I think that that's probably the case for many people. When we deeply know that our connections or our relationships are such a huge part of our lives, and the idea of losing them or putting them in jeopardy is a real fear.
This gets at, I think, a whole bunch of things. Like, even just in general, we have so often, like, personally, when I looked at those things that were important to me, when I was struggling with my mental health, but also I'd say this is when I didn't think I was struggling with my mental health. This is also how it was. It was all about avoiding fears. And I felt a big switch for me with mental health, starting to take care of my mental health, is what I call a switch from getting to giving, and that switch from being reactive to proactive. And so I really thought that the thing I had to do was avoid everything bad. And so people could judge me. I could hurt my friends. Even I had all sorts of food compulsions. I wouldn't cook for my friends because I was afraid I'd poison them. Like, there were just, and yeah, you could say, yeah, it's really good not to poison your friends. We'll throw that out to everybody listening. Super good not to poison your friends. In general, super good not to burn down your apartment building, all of that. But I realized that there could be an endless amount of fears that I would have to react to and control. And even if I controlled all of those, I wouldn't have created anything good. And I would do this often. I would avoid people because I was afraid either I would offend somebody, or somebody would be angry, or they didn't like me. I didn't deserve to be around them, whatever. I was managing all my fears. I was preventing them all from coming true. but I
Hmm.
wasn't building good relationships. I wasn't building healthy relationships. And so the big switch was from ditching this approach of I've got to avoid all the bad things to what are the good things I want to create. And I'm going to give my time and energy to those. Or another metaphor I often use for that is keeping the focus on how do we make good cookies. And if we identify those actions to just really bake delicious cookies, yeah, we'll address the fears. Like we're not going to put rocks in our cookies if we make good cookies. But if my focus is just on avoiding rocks in cookies, I won't necessarily make delicious cookies. And so there was this switch, and I would say that for everybody, because I think often this is one of the scary things when we start to explore making changes for mental health. People are afraid that, oh no, if I'm not thinking about how to not be a bad person, I'll go and
Mm.
be a bad person. I'll do terrible things.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we cling so much to these fears because we're afraid if I'm not constantly focused on them, I'm going to become this bad person. But actually, if we let go of them and we just build it around how do I, practice being the person I want to be to myself? How do I practice giving what I want to give to others in my community? We will create all of the amazing things we want. And we get to ditch the compulsions too. But
It's sort of
it's
like
a
not
scary flip.
identifying as, oh, I'm terrible at making cookies. I'm terrible at making cookies. I'm terrible. Oh, you should
Mhm.
see my cookies. They're always burned. They're always too much salt. And then living there, just staying there forever. I'm a
Mhm.
person who, as opposed to like you're saying, I'm going to try some recipes and it might be a process of learning. And I might make some batches that are better than others, but eventually, right? It's like instead of identifying as a bad cookie baker, I'm heading in the direction of just doing the thing itself and getting better at it. Is that right?
I think, yeah, there's that too. Like even so often, something I found weird about mental health communities is that they're often like joining a club for bad cookies.
Yeah,
Like where we
exactly.
review bad cookies, you're always going to have to go and find bad cookies and then be like, oh, these cookies sucked. Versus joining groups that are focused around like, okay, let's learn how to make good cookies.
Right,
And
right.
so that would
Yeah.
be, yeah, how I would apply that concept to how do we engage with mental health communities. And I think, again, that's where physical fitness, I find that approach more useful. Like if you've struggled with swimming, you don't join the drowning support group. Just be like, ah, yeah, we really struggle with swimming. And like you join the group to learn how to swim. And then as
Yeah.
soon as you're trying that and practicing that, you identify as a swimmer.
Mm.
You're not,
Yeah.
like I'm in recovery from drowning, and so I've got to go to these classes so I don't relapse. We're gonna go learn some skills and we're gonna grow those skills and build them. Yeah.
I find the same thing with riding horses. So I've just done a beginner's riding course, and we're all beginners. So we kind of don't really
Yeah.
know what we're doing. But I've also ridden in groups of people who are great, experienced riders. And when I'm with those riders, I'm still a beginner. I'm still fucking up. My feet are falling out of the stirrups. I'm feeling unsteady. But I watch them and they have a
Yeah.
command. And obviously a poison experience that I don't have, and I can see that and learn from them. Whereas I feel more comfortable around the beginners because I don't feel like the fish out of water. So there is
Mm,
a comfort level in, okay,
hmm.
we're all fudging this together, but I learn more and I'm pushed more
Mhm.
when I'm chucked with the experienced riders. And both of them feel uncomfortable in their own ways. It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable to recognize you're a beginner. It's an uncomfortable thing to be like,
Yeah.
wow, we're so bad. But it's also uncomfortable to be with the experienced people and go, wow, they're so much better than me. Will I ever be that good? I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to let everyone down. And so there's sort of a narrative that goes with both. I suppose if we're just following our feelings, it's hard to know whereabouts to situate ourselves. And we're often either called to go and find your community and be there and be part of that and talk about your mutual challenges, or someone who just goes, no, I'm going to go dive into it and put
Yeah.
myself, in the right in the fire.
You're reminding me of I've been
Yeah.
doing basically Vipassana retreats annually for years, but at the beginning, when I would be in we would have a longer sit before dinner. And it's kind of like separates the experience from the beginners because it's really challenging. And so I remember trying so hard to stick to it and getting to a point where it was so physically uncomfortable, I would have to break posture. And like you're describing, Ash. But this is kind of, I love this, that this is coming up today. I think we're all mentioning it. Something about practicing with other people is often missing from the conversation. Sharing notes about, here, I'm trying this, I'm learning this, I still need, but being in a room of like seasoned meditation practitioners to embody this is something doable. And all of us who are in a lot of physical pain and, stopping for whatever reason along the way, it's still, we're kind of in this together, that we can all maybe develop some internal and kind of invisible skills that people won't be able to see from the outside, that will we can pick up from these people who've been doing it longer than we have.
I wanted to finish on maybe hearing from you, Mark, about how you went from being this anxious, overthinking mess where these compulsions and urges were completely dominating your life. Tell us about the steps that took you out of that.
One of the things, and even it kind of speaks to the idea of, meditating in groups or riding horses in groups where people have done more, or even just knowing there's a process to that. Because, yeah, things were really bad. I was lucky enough that there was a research program happening at a hospital, like combined between a hospital and a university near where I was living. I was able to get exposure and response prevention therapy for free.
Mm,
Briefly, the funding, there was government funding for it. It got pulled while I was in it, and it shut down. But that was enough to start getting me onto the idea that, oh, these things that I'd done my entire life, I could actually make changes with them. And then a
mm,
key support with that, and how this relates to the exercises in the book, is that at the time I was learning how to facilitate and working as a kind of like a business management consultant focused on innovation. And a lot of that was emphasizing how much people in companies who we would see as like healthy or normal or whatever label we would stick on them, how much they sucked at change, and that the average human was incapable of making a change, especially doing something new, whether in a process or adding something new to a product. And that was just hammered home, that you couldn't go into a company and suggest we were going to change the slightest button on whatever piece of software they were using unless you had this massive change management apparatus behind it, messaging to people, multiple interactions with people, tangible and visible indicators of the change. But I found that in the mental health sector, often like the worst point in my life, I was expected to just talk about a change for an hour a week and then magically go and do it. So a lot of what I share in my book are actually exercises from innovation and change management in the business world applied to this
mm,
wild innovation we do in our lives. And so those same exercises and supports really helped me. So it was the combination of that evidence-based therapy that was so useful with this kind of design thinking support apparatus that just recognized all humans suck at change. So how do we make change into a kind of map
mm,
that we
mm.
can follow, that we can see, that we can consistently come back to? And so I would say, yeah, combining those two, that recognition that we can change with a recognition that we suck at change and need lots of support. Yeah, I would say that was the biggest help in making all these changes and sustaining them. Yeah.
And how remarkable for someone who needed to control and micromanage every aspect of their life to now being in Peru, living this nomadic lifestyle for years and years. Would you have ever imagined that for yourself?
No, because it was I think when I used to travel, when I struggled with compulsions, I would be so anxious. I never went on a trip without staying awake 24 hours in advance, because I would have to do all sorts of compulsions, but also I'd be so terrified that, oh no, I'll sleep through an alarm or something. It used to be, and I'd have to
Mm.
do so much around the house. And now it's just yeah, it's part of it. It's one of the reasons I headed off to travel to help other people see what's possible, but also because it's possible for me now. So
Yeah.
I, yeah, really enjoy it.
That's awesome, Mark. Thank you so much. It's so inspiring and so great to have this sort of content around mental health, around mindfulness out in the world and accessible and interesting. And I hope that anyone who's interested will go and grab a copy of Mark's book. It's really, really worthwhile. We're so grateful that you could join us for an hour this morning for some chats.
Oh no,
Yeah.
thank you both for, yeah, it was wonderful chatting, but also thank you both for, yeah, picking up the book and exploring it and just exploring these concepts and skills with everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for bringing humanity back to the puzzle of instead of treating each other like robots, let's go back to messy humanity and work together on that. So, thanks you guys.